Hey, all right, in this video we're going to finish off the number cruncher one. We're going to be taking our list and actually changing the list this time. So we're going to go into number cruncher and look at the transforming list. So I want to take a list and change it into a new list. So we're just going to do 1 and 2. If you want to do the bonus for extra points, you can do the bonus. But again, not required. So I'm just going to be going over 1 and 2. So first off, we're going to write a custom Snap Reporter block called Make All Positive, where it takes a list of numbers, and if they're negative, it changes them to a positive. So they're just getting the absolute value of those numbers. So what I'm going to do, there's a couple different ways around this, but what I'm going to do is just take it, and if it's negative, I'm going to make it positive. If it's positive, I'm going to leave it alone. So let's go into our little snap here, and we're going to make a new custom block. What did they want it to be called? Make all positive. Okay. So we're going to make a block, and we're going to call it make all positive. Make all positive. And I believe it was a reporter block. It's going to report a list. So we're going to click OK for make all positive. And now again, I want to be able to add a list in as an argument. So I'm going to click that add, that plus after make all positive. And we are going to make it a list. And I'm just going to call it list. Again, you can call this something a little bit more specific. You can call it like positive. Well, you don't want to call it positive list because that's what I'm going to use that later. So let's go with, maybe I'll just use it report list. I don't know. I'm just going with list. We're going to go there. So we've got a list. We've named it list, and we're going to click OK. So there's my new list that I have here. Let's make this whole thing bigger. I don't understand. Maybe I should write into Snap and say, hey, make these things bigger. But, you know, whatever. So we're going to have a report at the end, and we're going to report a list at the end. So in order to get to there, we've got to set a few things up. Now, I have been doing something a little wonky on my variables, my script variables, because if I bring that in, I've been bringing in and adding an index, and then bringing in another block and another block and another block. Now, this time, I'm not going to bring in another block. I'm just going to click that arrow, and this is going to give me a new variable. So these can all be controlled by the same block. You don't have to drag in 50 different blocks. So I'm going to add a new variable to this same block. Now, this variable, I want to call it my report list. This is going to be a list that is what gets finally reported at the end, because it's not going to be the same as the list that gets put into this, because this is going to maybe have some negatives. I want absolute values out of this one here. So then I want to set some things. Let's set, oh, I grabbed change. Set, and another set. So let's first set our index. And this time I do want to do it for all numbers, so it's going to start at 1. And we're going to set our report list, and we're just going to make it a blank list. I want to make sure it's going to be a list, not that way, that way. Because if it's not a list, it's not going to set things up right. So we're going to have our report list as a list. Now, we're going to do this for the entirety, every number in our list. So I'm going to get a repeat. And we're going to repeat for a length of list. And I'm going to grab my if else, because that's going to come in later and I don't want to come back to my control. So repeat for length of list, which is right here. And this is going to be the length of the list that we put in. And now we've got an if and an else. So if that number is positive, I just don't want to do anything to it. So if it's negative is where I want to do something. So in my if, I'm going to use the if it is actually negative. So if item index of list is less than 0, that means it's negative, right? So if item, our new index of the list that gets put in, is less than 0. So I'm going to grab a less than 0. This means it's a negative number. Anything less than 0 is going to be negative. So if item index of list is less than 0, then what do we want to do? Then what I want to do is add an item to my new reporter list that isn't the same as that item index of list. I want to change it a little bit. So I want to do an add. So variables here, we are going to add a number to a list. So if I look here, there should be, there it is, add thing to list. So we are going to add something to our new report list. What we're going to add is item index of list, but I want to change it. So what I can do is either multiply or divide by a -1 to get the opposite of what that thing is. So I'm going to do divide just because I think that's going to work a little more in my brain pan here. So what I'm going to do is take item index of list divided by a -1, and that's going to give me a positive version of that same thing. So if I take a -2 divided by a -1, negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. So it'd be a +2. If same thing for all the other numbers. Again, you could use multiply here if you want. I'm just going to use divide. So we are going to add item index of list divided by a -1 to our report list. And then we want to change our index by 1 and move to the next thing. So we're going to change index by 1. Boop. Index by 1. Cool. So we've added that to our report list. We've changed our index by 1. Now what if it's positive? If it's positive, I don't have to do anything? No, I still have to add it to my report list. So I want to add, boop, but this time I don't have to do any dividing. I'm just going to add the item index of list to my report list. And then also I do want to change my index again because I'm going to move on to the next number. So change index by 1, duplicate again, drop it in there. So now I should have everything possible added to the list. So if it's less than 0, I change it. If it's not less than 0, I don't change it. Add it all to the list. And then finally at the end, I'm going to report my report list. And I don't need this. Whoop, drag that off and throw it away. And I think that's it. So if I have done this correctly, it should work to give us absolute values of all those numbers in a new list. We are going to click apply. And we're going to click OK. All right, so now what I should do is find that new block. Boop. Make all positive. There it is. Now, I just have one here that has a negative in here. If all is correct, we should have a list that's 94, 183, 14, and 8. Let's click it. 94, 183, 14, and 8. Yay! It has made that negative a positive. Let's throw a couple more negatives in there just to be 100% sure. Let's add like a 0, because a 0 is not a negative number. Let's see, how about a -1 as well? Okay, so let's see what happens here. Whoop. All right, all of those are now positive. The 0 didn't get changed around because it's just a 0. Yay. All right, looking good. And one more to do. We are going to make a new block, and this one, whoop, is going to be only evens. We only want the even integers to be in our final reported list. So this is going to be very similar to the stuff we just did. So let's go in, and I'm going to show you a new block here as we go through, just so you're aware. We only want the evens. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Boop. So I'm going to call my new block evens only. Evens only. And it is going to be a reporter block. It's going to report a list. We're going to click OK. And again, got to drag this box out way bigger than it is. and we are going to add. So we click that as our little argument. Got to drag the arrow out. It's got to be a list. I'm just going to call it list. Again, simplicity. And click OK. So I've got a list, and I'm going to be reporting a new list at the bottom. I'm going to be traversing through the list, so I'm going to need that script variable of my index. So I'm going to set up an index, and we'll also put in a script variable for our report list. I'm just going to call it my evens list. Okay. And then I want to set my index to 1 because I'm going to go through each and every one of those numbers. And we're going to set our evens to a list. Making it a list so that everything goes nice and smooth. Cool. Okay. So same thing as last time. I'm going to go into control. We're going to do this for the length of the list. And I'm also going to grab my if-else for later use. All right, so we're not going to repeat it 10 times. We are going to repeat for the length of a list. Let's see, length of list. There we go. Repeat for length of, and then the list we made up here. We don't want to repeat it for the length of our evens list because it's at 0 right now. There's nothing in the list. Okay, so now I've got my if-else. And then finally, when we're done, we're actually going to report our evens list. I'll just do that now to get it out of the way. All right, so what I want to do is find out if something is even. So we're going to look at a new block here, which is the mod block. So mod is basically, it's a little bit hard to explain, but it has to do with remainders. So you're looking for your remainder. So like if a number mod 2 has 0 remainder, so equals 0, then it's even. If it mod 2 is not 0, if there's remainders afterward, then it is an odd number. So mod 2 equals 0. So any number that's even, mod 2 should equal 0. Let's see, if I put in a 2 here, 2 mod 2, there shouldn't be a remainder, it should be true. 1 mod 2, there should be a remainder, it's going to be false. Okay, so it has to do with remainders, we're not getting into decimals on that. So in this case, so we're looking for item index of list mod 2 equals 0. That means it's even. So if item index of our list up here, mod 2 equals 0, that means it is even, and I'm going to add that item to my list. So add thing to list is what I'm looking for. There we go. Add. Sorry about that. I didn't realize my ringer wasn't turned off. Sorry. It's a telemarketer. Sorry about that. Let's see. So I'm going to duplicate this. Whoop. Add item index of list to my new evens list. To evens. And then I want to change my index by 1 to move on to the next one. Change index by 1. Now, if it does not equal 0, that means we've got an else situation. So it's not an even number. That means I don't want to add it to my list. I am just going to change my index by 1 and move on. And I think that's it. I mean, it looks a little complicated with this weird mod thing, but again, that's just trying to figure out if it's even or odd. It has to do with remainders. I'm not going to get too into the technical terminology of it. If you want to know, what you can actually do is if you go to, I'm going to click apply and OK. If you go to that block and right click on it, there's a little help box that comes up, and this explains like every little bit that goes into it. Yeah, so it gives the remainder of the division of two numbers. For example, it's 5. If it doesn't equal 0, that's what the remainder ends up being. Okay, so we want our remainder to be 0. All right, so we've got that all set up. Now I got to find my block and make sure evens is going to work. So evens only. And let's try this one, because this should be 1 to 10. So if I click this, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Nice. So this one down here, most of those are actually even. Boop. 94, negative 14, 8, and 0. Yay. Those are evens. Cool. It looks like that's about it. If you want to try for the extra bonus thing, you can. Otherwise, we're done for today. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later.